welcome to the Tennis IQ podcast. I'm Josh Berger.
And I'm Brian Lomax. And today we're going to talk about senior tennis. We know that a lot of our listeners are over 40 and are engaged in senior tennis activities. And I don't know about you, Josh, but sometimes it feels like we're often talking either about juniors or pros. And, there are a whole lot of other people out there that play tennis. And, I would obviously have to put myself into the senior category. You are not there yet and probably happy not to be there yet. But you have stuff to look forward to. And I think that's maybe one of the themes of today's episode. When I think of senior tennis and continuing to play this sport, which we do call a sport for a lifetime for a reason, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, well, why? Why do people continue to play? And I wonder if, from your your background, Josh, and reading, why do you think senior athletes or senior tennis players continue to play this game?
Yeah, well, tennis definitely has been called a lifetime sport. I mean, I think to where I'm currently coaching and to past clubs, and it's not uncommon to see players in their 80s, even in their 90s, who are still playing, still really enjoying the sport, still getting a lot of fulfillment out of it. And I think a good way to start breaking down why people play is through through thinking about motivation, thinking about self determination theory. So I think thinking about these three core facets of self determination theory, which I think we've touched on a little bit in previous episodes, but thinking about autonomy, thinking about relatedness, or being able to form some sort of community, some sort of interaction with other players, and then mastery. So breaking it down into these three facets, I think is definitely a good place to start in terms of why people continue to play at later ages, and how they can continue to draw fulfillment from the sport.
Yeah, no, I think that is a good framework. And really, as we've said in the past, you can apply this to any facet of your life. And I think autonomy is a good place to start because we all feel like we want to be in control. And at if you're 35 or 40 or over, um, you're obviously not playing to make a college team. You're not playing to get on the pro tour. There are a couple of exceptions out there. It's not like no one's ever tried that. But in general, you're doing it because you want to, and you're making the choice. And I found something interesting about passion. We often think that one has to have passion for what we do. And certainly those of us who are playing senior tennis have passion for what we're doing. But this article had talked about breaking passion into two different flavors, which I thought was interesting. One was obsessive passion, which is where an athlete feels like, their sport is such a part of who they are, they just have to do it. They almost have no choice. And that is why they do it. And I'm sure that there are some people listening who feel that way about tennis, that it is just a part of who they are and that it is their lifestyle and they just simply must do it. It is an obsession. But more often we find a different kind of passion, which is called harmonious passion, meaning that your passion, something like tennis, it just fits into your life harmoniously. It is something that you want to do, choose to do. If you couldn't do it, you'd probably be okay with it to a certain extent. You'd miss it. But it really is something that's kind of in tune with just who you are as a person, not your identity per se, but it's something that you certainly identify with. And I think that goes along with autonomy, the autonomy aspect of self determination, um, where we feel in control, like we're the ones who want to do this. Um, so I thought it was a really kind of cool way of breaking passion down into two different concepts.
Well, no, I definitely agree. From my experiences, I've seen both examples. I've seen the players who continue to play, year after year, and it just seems to be part of their way of life. And whether or not they really are enjoying it or fulfilled by it, that's just that's just what they continue to do, and it's almost so a core part of their identity that they're not willing to, ever stray from it or take a break just because that is, who they are. Where I also see these examples of players who really seem to continue to enjoy the sport year after year, who maybe have set, new goals for themselves and are, continuing to tinker with their game and trying to take things to the next level, whatever that may be. That may mean continuing to play in tournaments. That may mean just trying out new things at the club, new clinics, playing with different players. So I definitely have seen that in my own experiences, the difference between both sorts of players. But I would say that as more with senior level players, you do more see that harmonious passion, really, because nobody is telling them that they have to keep playing. It's all coming from them. Where sometimes you see with other sorts of players, maybe it's a junior player or a professional player, where they're playing it because their parents want them to play, and maybe they're not as actually motivated by the sport. Or maybe a professional player who is playing it because they have put all this time in, and now they're working towards a paycheck or a professional ranking, and they don't see it as really them having a choice at that point to stop. Where a senior level player, they more often than not, I would say, are playing for quote unquote the right reasons, playing for themselves, playing for their own passion and their own goals.
And so, as you're getting older, Josh, and I think like in college, we probably feel sort of this obligatory thing, like we've got to train, we've got to practice, right? Because we're part of the team. So there's a little bit of a more controlled aspect to that motivation. It's not 100% necessarily from you. You have a coach and whatever. And I feel like a lot of players, once they finish with college, they may stop for a little while, or they may not. So um, how do you kind of see your own transition there from like college, where you had to be playing, part of what you did, and now you've gotten into teaching tennis, so maybe a different path than some of your fellow teammates. How many of your teammates still play?
There are definitely some. I would say it's sort of split. There's some that continue to play, also some that coach, and others that either have stopped playing or don't play as regularly. I would say from my own personal experience, I needed a couple years, actually during my master's program, where I stopped competing. Wasn't playing as regularly, and then after that started really getting into after the master's program, started coaching full time and started to play more. Still haven't competed as much as certainly as much as I did during college or during my juniors, but starting to. I would say it's been just over 5 years now, about 5.5 years, and starting to really get that that itch to get out there and compete, and and there have been select tournaments in the past couple years, but I think you get to a certain point where you start to miss it and start to want to be out there competing, putting it out on the line.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. So as the good news is there are a lot of opportunities as you do get older for competing and staying in the game, and which is great. Um, so I think the next aspect of self-determination theory that we can talk about is the idea of mastery or competence. And I know from my own perspective, this was a shift that I definitely made, um, of focusing less on results. Not that they weren't important or rankings, but really understanding more process stuff, a lot of the stuff we talked about with Jeff Greenwald, and then making improvements in those little areas and focusing on those and just trusting that they would build up. And so I felt like that was part of the reason I feel like I got better actually after 35 was a shift in perspective from not so much about winning, but really more process orientation toward improving and becoming, the best player that I could become. And I think at 35, and players like Nadal and Federer and Djokovic are showing this, you can still get better. You can still physically be exceptional, between 35 and maybe even 50. I know some of the events I've played that I'm often amazed at how strong, fast, and athletic some of these guys are that play national events. I see, I don't see I'm sure the same is true on the women's side, but typically in the senior level events, you don't have as many mixed events. So we don't often see the women. There are a few events, category two events. Well, you'll have that, but the category one events, which are sort of the top tier, right? So clay courts, hard courts, grass courts, and an indoor. Usually those are single sex, and often at the younger levels, even single age group. But I'm always amazed at the level of athleticism that I have seen from the 35s into the 50s. Like some of these players are just absolutely amazing. Um, so, but for me personally, it was that shift of process orientation versus result orientation that helped make me a better player. And I think that's I wasn't necessarily doing that because of self determination theory. I just sort of kind of got into it that way.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, I would even say from my own experiences, and again, it's a smaller sample size of just a few tournaments after college, but not getting as caught up on the results or on any one particular match, because I think as you get older, you start to your perspective that, hey, this one match or this one tournament doesn't define me.
Right.
I think for younger players, juniors, college players, whatever it may be, a lot of people can fall into this trap of thinking that any one event or any one match is really what defines them, how they identify with their most recent result. And I think as players mature and get older, their perspective changes, that this one match will happen. I've won plenty of matches. I've lost plenty of matches. This doesn't change, who I am. My core beliefs of who I am as a person, as a tennis player. But I think it's easier to have that long term perspective, that if I want to continue to reach my goals, if I wanted to continue to improve, that I need to focus on this process. I need to be, I need each of my strokes to be at the highest level they can be. I need to be as mentally tough and be able to control my emotions. And we can talk about the physical piece of recovering and rest, but I need to be doing all of these things that are a part of the process in order for me to perform my best, rather than saying I need to win this tournament this weekend. So that's from my perspective, and some of the players that I've worked with, as well as some of my own experiences, that shift with senior level players compared to some younger players.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think your perspective improves. You kind of realize, hey, we're not going to be pros. We're not going to Wimbledon. So this is more of a personal journey, and then it becomes easier to detach from the sense of having to win.
Yep.
Um, that doesn't mean that we don't want to win. Doesn't mean we don't want to have good rankings, etc. But I think it's that perspective that comes into play. Yeah, so I think that's definitely beneficial for players to focus more on improvement, little aspects of their performance. And a lot of the research shows that focusing more on the perceptual skills and mental toughness skills and decision making skills can be more beneficial than, say, just focusing on technique and playing. And which I think is interesting in, as I work with some senior players, um, there are going to be some drop offs physically as we get older, whether that be speed or power. But that doesn't mean your game the level has to go down, especially if you are improving your perceptual skills. And what I mean by that is more anticipation. So being able to read the game a little bit better, maybe moving to a spot a little bit sooner, just because if you've worked on that aspect of things. Your decision making, where you hit shots, and from what parts of the court, and maybe even strategies. I think you can become more tactically aware. And then there's a lot of stuff on the mental toughness piece, process orientation being one of them, but focusing more on having, good routines on the court, etc. And I feel again like not overtly conscious of this, kind of did that on my own with especially the mental toughness piece. And that was really the key for me, post 35, helping me improve. And I would say the biggest thing for me was actually the in between point routine and being able to reset myself from point to point. That had always been a struggle for me. It had been temper um, and sort of letting my thoughts be a little bit too much in the past, getting a little too upset. But that in between point routine and resetting really almost changed everything. Um, and so, I think you probably see this with a lot of senior players that you work with. Working on that mental aspect can really make a huge difference.
Absolutely. No, I think you bring up a great point that by training the mental game, by training, whether it be that the decision making or that ability to be able to reset and move on from that previous point, that we can that there's no reason why that performance level has to drop. And in fact, it can increase. I mean, you hear plenty of examples, whether it's your own Brian or in our most recent episode with Jeff Greenwald, how in after your 20s and 30s, you can continue to play at actually a higher level.
Yeah, I
And
mean, he mentioned that he feels like he's playing as well now at 54, I think he said, than he's played. Like when he was in college, he probably beat his college self. So, yeah, absolutely. And you're going to be smarter as well.
exactly, and these experiences that you have through your career, you can draw on them as you're playing. So you win the first set, you play great, and then somebody wins that second set, and many players would get down and lose that third set automatically, or in a very lopsided way. But if you have the experience and the composure to be able to look back and draw from past matches where that same situation has happened before, then you can say, okay, I've been through this before. I have the tools to pull myself out of this. I remember what happened 2 years ago in a similar match where I was frustrated. I was down in the third set, and I was able to compose myself and come up with a strategy and came back and win that match.
Yeah.
So being able to draw on those experiences through playing more and more is also an advantage. I would say.
Yeah. And one intervention that we can share that can help players do this more um, comes from Anders Ericsson, deliberate practice.
Yep.
And the idea of journaling about what you do. And this is a specific type of journaling process or the deliberate practice process. And it's about every practice or match that you have, setting some goals for what you want to focus on or achieve, what you want to get out of that experience, and then really paying attention to those focal points. So whether it's mental or not, you could be saying something, well, maybe I want to work on um, more depth with, my backhand. So that's what I'm going to focus on. It's going to be one of, say, three focus goals that I have for my training. And then when the training is over, I come back and I rate how I think I did with that. There's some probably, blur between deliberate and purposeful practice. I think both are helpful here. Um, and then if you can be rating those things and then afterwards reflect on, okay, what went well today? What could have been better? What did I learn? If it's a match, what would I do differently next time? And this type of reflection and journaling and just attitude toward practice can really help senior tennis players make some of those improvements, because you're just being so much more purposeful and reflective of what you want to do.
Yeah, yeah, I really like that approach. Um, I think it helps players have a clear intention, because you think back to your most recent practice or your last week, and what's been going well, what you want to continue working on, and so you're more likely to have a clear intention going into each practice. And as you said, you can reflect and you can learn from these experiences and then change things or tinker if need be. And to me, I would also sort of tie this to a concept we've talked in the past about confidence journal.
Yeah.
Mention some things that went well in any particular day, and you you can look back at those experiences maybe the night before a tournament, or in the days leading up to a tournament if you're feeling nervous or anxious about that experience, and again draw um, from looking back at that confidence journal, and draw from those positive experiences you've had.
Yeah. And I think reflecting even on your matches is really important, um, especially the really maybe the ones that you're disappointed with. I remember a match from, I want to say maybe 2013, 2014. It was a national clay courts, and it was a match I wasn't very happy with. I ended up playing very passively. It was a very winnable match. He was a good player, um, but like I said, it was a winnable match, but it sort of let him win. And I was really disappointed. And I remember coming off the court, and I had a guy I'd played against in the past, that I'm friendly with, and he's like, "Yeah, it's not really." I mean, I kind of said that, that's not really a good loss. He's like, "Yeah, you really should have won that match," and so I was really kind of upset about it. And so I went through the journaling process, figured out what went wrong. It kind of came out of that process saying, "All right, I am never gonna let that happen again."
Right.
But without having gone through that process, I wouldn't have come to that conclusion. And then after that, Josh, I want to say a month later, I had two huge wins. And then I had a great summer. And so I look back now at that loss with gratitude. If it hadn't been for that loss, I might have continued a pattern of more passive play rather than really realizing something needed to change. But I also think it was the reflection process that helped me figure it out.
Yeah, and often it takes a match like that that is very tough in the moment,
Yeah.
um, to learn something about yourself, or to have a realization that, hey, I never want to play in that way again. And maybe you wouldn't have come to that had you not actually had that experience. And I think the journaling process is a big part of sort of fleshing that out, and coming to that conclusion. Um, one of I will say that, and this ties in, um, whatever age, whatever level that you're at, you should be trying to analyze and learn from your matches. As a
Great.
coach, one of the things I like to hear least, if somebody lost a match or maybe they didn't play great, you ask them about it and they don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to even think about it. They just out of sight, out of mind. And that approach, though I get it, it's maybe unpleasant or painful to think back to that moment. However, the only way that you can learn and grow from that moment, and hopefully have it never happen again, is really to think, hey, what went wrong here? Let's really think back. Let's analyze this. And it sounds like from your experience, Brian, you did that. You were able to be honest with yourself and say, hey, I could have done something differently here, that could have led to a different result. And because of that realization, you were able to make that change that led to greater results.
Yeah. And I think you're maybe the perspective that needs to change is not looking at competition as like the end all be all, but rather looking at competition as simply a part of your journey.
Yep.
And um, I think Jorge Capistani even said, they're almost like little quizzes along the way, and they help you learn and learn and learn. And yeah, you're basically missing the opportunity to improve your game when we look at it that way. We also don't want to blow off the wins either. Like just to say, oh, I won, I played fine. Yeah, there are always opportunities to look at that because there might be something that, hey, maybe you found a formula for playing great. We don't want to ignore that. Maybe there's some things about this performance we need to be replicating more often.
Yep.
So there's still a lot to find in the wins as well. But you're right. Anybody, any age, should be going through a reflective process for their tennis.
And I think you bring up a good point there that I as a coach, and I'm sure you can relate that. I hear it all the time, or I see it all the time. How was your match? Oh, I won 6-2, 6-3. Okay, great, but how was your match? And
Yeah.
especially if you won. Okay, so what did you do well? What can we make as as a recipe of your success, right? As part of that recipe that you've talked about in the past, Brian. If you won today, what did you serve well? Did you use a certain pattern? Did you have a certain mindset mentality that helped you win today? What did you do well that you want to continue to replicate and continue to do every single time you're out on court?
Yeah, I think that's really important because ultimately that's what we're trying to find is that recipe for a great performance. I think it's not um, a complete story if we just paying more attention to the losses. I think there's a lot to glean out of the good matches. All right, so the last part of self determination theory has to do with relatedness, and it's more the social aspects of sport and tennis. And I think that this is actually a really interesting aspect of senior tennis. I remember before I was in the 35s, I used to see some of the guys from the 35s there. Um, and it was like a really good group of guys that were competing against each other. And I was like actually wanting to be older so I could be a part of that. And then when I became 35, um, it was as good as I thought it was going to be. And not only just sort of the camaraderie of the tournaments, which was different, say, than maybe the Opens. Although I would say when I was playing Opens in the 90s, there was a good camaraderie of the players, which was pretty cool. And even when some of the kids would play, there was a lot of good synergy with the junior players who would play up and play men's Opens. That doesn't really happen anymore, but it did back then. But there was really a good camaraderie there. And then getting introduced to all of the team potential events. Of course, we have, like we've talked about before, league tennis, which allows people to play. And now there's even more opportunities for that in the senior groups, right? So now there's 40 plus leagues. And then I think that there's 55 and over. I'm less fluent on the USTA league opportunities, sort of post 55. But there may be even more 65. But then there are just a whole bunch of age group events um, that players can participate in from a team perspective. So here, we live in New England. One of my favorite events is this Friendship Cup that we have, which is a competition between New England and Quebec, and it's for players 45 and over. And every 5 years, there's a team, and I know we've had years where we've had players in the 80s playing. Which is pretty cool. So it's a lot of matches. There's like 32 or 36 guys on each of the teams, and we spend one day playing singles, one day playing doubles, and it often comes down to the last few matches, and it's just a great environment. And then there are other team events. So I think that was one thing that was really kind of fun to look forward to. Getting into the older events is getting the possibility of playing in these team events along with the tournaments.
Yeah, yeah. You've told me about these experiences at off air before, but yeah, they definitely sound awesome and like a great camaraderie between the members of the team. And I've seen it at different places where I've worked in the past through you know, various USTA leagues, men and women, of different age groups. And what stands out to me is, yes, there's drama at times, and that's, you know, so certainly part of, can be part of the USTA league experience. But often there's a lot of camaraderie. Oftentimes the players in the team get very close. They practice together. They'll hang out outside of tennis, and I think that social piece really helps a lot of players continue to play the sport and continue to be engaged and want to keep working on their game or keep playing. And I think that social piece, and I think whether it's some of these competitions that you've talked about, Brian, or USTA leagues, or any other sorts of competitive elements that can make tennis team based. I think that definitely makes players a lot more likely to continue playing and feel more motivated. So I think that last piece, that relatedness piece, is huge. I think that oftentimes makes can make competing and can make the hard work that leads up to the competition a lot more enjoyable, because they're surrounded by people that they enjoy being with, and it's not just for them. They're doing it for a team.
Yeah, yeah, you're playing for something a little bit bigger, and it's fun to be part of that tennis community. And in a section like we live in, it's relatively small. So we most of the players know each other, and I'm sure that that's true at all the different NTRP levels as well. For players who are on teams that end up going to sectionals, they probably often see some of the same people year after year, from the different states. That was certainly true when I was playing more of those events. And then, it's great with USTA League to get the opportunity to go to nationals. Um, and that's always a fun thing. I know you've mentioned how much you enjoyed playing at Indian Wells when you were in college. I actually got to play there as part of a 40 plus USTA league. So we made nationals one year, and it was stunning, really beautiful
Tennis.
playing there. Yeah, it really is. And and that tennis opened up that opportunity. And I think whether it's community or whatnot, I think another thing that maybe I didn't even mention this, Josh, but I think I've pushed some of my students to do this. But what senior tennis has really helped me to do, it's given me the opportunity to travel and play. I've played tournaments in Scottsdale, Arizona, Indian Wells, Fort Lauderdale, Daytona Beach, Savannah, Georgia, Kansas City, Missouri, Jackson, Mississippi, um, just to name a few. And we got to play, actually, the National Public Parks event was at the site of the U.S. Open back in 2006. I had never played on those courts before. Um, and it just gave me the opportunity to go and travel to these places, and it was fun to spend your week like just being a tennis player. Um, and so I think that that's another cool aspect. And one of my longtime senior tennis clients, uh, he plays national tournaments every year now. And before we had started working, he was just really playing in New England. I was like, yeah, you should try some of this. I mean, you're so into tennis, and it's such a small community in New England. Why not just branch out and go and meet new people? And he ended up actually buying a house in the desert in California. So now, like when he plays tournaments, he's got a place to stay. So I think that that's another aspect of senior tennis that people can look forward to is traveling with the sport.
That's awesome. I mean, um, I the so for those who know me well, or who know me on a personal level, I've sort of done that, not in terms of competing, but in terms of actually attending tournaments in all different places, whether that be in this country in Indian Wells, or at the Davis Cup Finals in Madrid, or Davis Cup finals in Serbia or different places. But I would say as I continue to play and get back into competition, I think that that travel aspect would definitely make it a lot of fun. And I think there's also, I would imagine, also a sort of camaraderie with some of the other players that you're competing against, where everyone has this shared experience
Yeah.
um, of continuing to play and train, and I would also assume a level of mutual respect that's there, based on everyone recognizing that people are making sacrifices and that level of commitment that's needed to continue playing year after year.
Yeah. And you definitely connect with people from other sections of the U.S. So I know the years that I was playing on the national circuit, see different guys, see some of the same guys at different tournaments. It was really that was always very very cool. And this is something I haven't done, but I would love to do at some point in the future is play some ITF senior events in Europe and red clay or whatever. That'd be another great way to just travel and see that. And for the players who are good enough, there are senior world championships, both for a team level. So for you could represent the United States or whatever country you're from. Um, and then usually the week after, it's an individual tournament. So I know like when I was playing, I think the best ranking I had was in 2006, and I was hoping to get invited to be on the world team. It didn't happen, but that year it was in Turkey at this resort that had like 27 red clay courts. Would have been an awesome opportunity, but that has moved around. It's been in New Zealand. It's been in Miami, um, and so for the players who are good enough, that's a fantastic benefit of playing. But certainly, yeah, the ITF has its own senior tour that you can be getting ranked in. Even some of the events in the U.S. have ITF points. So I think my best ITF ranking was like 92 in the world. So yeah, it's not bad. When I'm now wasn't even trying for it. Um, just it was like, oh wow, I get ranking points for that. That's cool.
I think as as you continue to compete, I think at times players may have a certain ranking goal in mind, where other
Yeah,
times it may be maybe playing for other reasons. But I think that being able to achieve a ranking like that, like a top 100 world ranking, is very cool. Is something to certainly write home about. I mean, somebody like Jeff Greenwald, who some of his. I know at one point he was number one in the 35 plus, and just being able to continue to reach milestones
yeah,
um, at in your 30s or 40s or 50s beyond is I think something that sets tennis apart from a lot of other sports. I think of whether it be a team sport or even individual sports. I think tennis is unique in the fact that so many players continue to play at a later age and continue to compete. So I think going back to that point of tennis really being a lifetime sport, it's I think it's really cool that you can continue to travel the world and compete against players around the world at whatever age group you're in.
yeah. And of course, you don't have to do these things, and it's very easy to just stay where you are and play with your group of friends, or here in Massachusetts. I mean, things are different, obviously, this year, but typically we have a lot of indoor leagues that are not associated with the USTA that are extremely popular, that have been around for a long time, and there's a lot of camaraderie around those teams. So I remember playing in the Central Mass League or the North Shore Doubles League. There's a ton of camaraderie, and a lot of those teams actually would stick together and have USTA league teams in the summer. Um, so yeah, you don't have to do these things. These are just opportunities out there that we wanted to talk about. But yeah, you can just stay where you are and find your group and play for the rest of your life. And the mental and physical health benefits of tennis are fantastic because you're not only training your aerobic system, you're training your anaerobic system. You're doing things in a physical way. You're using your coordination. You're using your cognitive skills. It's almost everything you need in one package, for long-term health.
Absolutely. There's actually a article from the New York Times just from a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
and we can link to that in the show notes. But it's titled "The Best Sport for a Longer Life: Try Tennis." And there's research that has showed that's compared tennis to some other sports that has really showed that there are many benefits for elongating your life through tennis. I mean, through the aerobic and anaerobic benefits of it, and there's the way that the tennis as a sport combines so many different aspects of athleticism. I think so. It certainly makes it unique compared to a lot of other sports. So no, certainly psychological and physical benefits of continuing to play the sport. Near or far.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So maybe just to wrap up, Josh, we can kind of summarize some of the things that we've talked about, or at least from a training perspective. I think, if senior tennis players are listening to this, how do you want to get better? From a training perspective. I do think, from the research that I've looked at, training your anticipation skills, your decision making skills on the court, and then looking at various aspects of your mental toughness, right? Looking at creating routines on the court, um, learning to focus better, reflective exercises are super important to improvement. And I would say we didn't really get into this that much, but the whole idea of we really, as senior tennis players, need good recovery routines. So the more research you can put into that, whether that be, I actually just got one of these recently, a Theragun, how you do that type of thing, stretching, foam rolling, ice baths, nutrition, everything that you can do to have better recovery.
Yeah. I think that recovery piece is huge for continuing to get out there, and not letting one long match or one tough weekend at a tournament um, put put you on the sidelines for a period of time. And yeah, I think you brought up some great points there in terms of training that anticipation. I think there's a lot that coaches can help with on the practice court with that, whether that just be hand feeding and surprising players with which side you're going to be feeding to, um, or all sorts of different hand-eye coordination sorts of drills, as well as the reflective practices such as journaling. I would also say things like mindfulness can also be helpful, um, to help players to gain clarity in those tough moments. On the court, I certainly recommend this to all sorts of players. But no, I think being able to continue focusing on the mental side of the game and train some of these areas, such as our tactics, making sure that you're um, making the right decisions on the court. It are the types of things that can help players to play at their best possible level.
Yeah, especially as we get older and older, things are gonna tend to slow down, but we don't have to drop our level so much. And a lot of the research has shown that elite players tend not to drop their level very much, even as they get older, right? So which is pretty cool. Um, well, great. Thanks, Josh. That's our show for today. So, want to thank everybody for listening to this episode on senior tennis. For more on today's show, please check out our show notes. If you have any feedback or questions for me and Josh, please email us at tennisiqpodcast@gmail.com. You can also use the Twitter hashtag tennisiq. Additionally, please subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice, which also includes YouTube, so that you can be notified of any new episodes. You can also check us out on Instagram, where we put up notifications of new episodes. Thanks again for listening, and we will talk to you soon in our next episode.